Let me ask y'all something right. How many of you are truly fans of the subgenre known as horrorcore? For those who don't know the definition, horrorcore is the darkest corner of hip-hop, rooted in nightmare imagery and violent, often disturbing, lyrical content. We're talking about artists you might know well, the Ghetto Boys, Insane Clown Posse, even the early work of Eminem, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and Tech Nine. It's shocking, yes, but it's always been about fiction and performance. But what happens when the line between the stage and real life dissolves? Today, we delve into a true-life horror story that shattered the music world and became one of the most chilling, misunderstood cases in American legal history. We are talking about the rapper Antron Singleton, better known to the Bay Area and the streets as Big Lurch. This is not a fictional track about a monster. This is the true account of a promising artist's descent, driven by pain and the crushing power of a drug called PCP. The silence after the headlines hit was louder than any blast. It's a story of accidental fame, addiction, murder, and a desperate fight for justice from behind bars. A fight even the victim's mother has joined. The man the world would come to know as Big Lurch was born Antron Singleton on September 15, 1976, in Dallas, Texas. The environment wasn't easy, but the young Antron found his earliest escape not on the playground, but in the rhythm of words. By the age of 7, he was already writing poetry, driven by a deep desire to express the complexity of his world. Hip-hop was booming during this time, and it was the sound that spoke to the youth, becoming a major influence on Antron. By the time he was 15, he took rap seriously, adopting the name Dindy G, Spade, and performing shows across the city, rapping over other artists' beats. But Antron Singleton was not just an aspiring rapper. He was a literal giant. He grew to be 6'7" in height, a towering presence that quickly earned him a new moniker from his friends, Big Lurch. The name, a reference to the imposing butler Lurch from the classic television show The Addams Family, stuck immediately. Seeking to elevate his career beyond the local scene, Big Lurch made the pivotal decision to move to Vallejo, California, in the famed Bay Area. This move allowed him to connect with his father who was already living there, but more importantly, it placed him in the heart of one of hip-hop's most fertile grounds. It was in the Bay that Lurch connected with Mac Mall, an established rapper who introduced him to the legendary producer Mike Mosley. Mosley was a force in the Bay Area music scene, known for his work with icons like E40, Mac Dre, Sibbo, Sally Sell, Richie Rich, and even the late, great Tupac Shakur. At the time, Mosley found Big Lurch sleeping in a garage, and, recognizing the raw talent and the hardship of the young artist, he took Lurch under his wing, driven by a genuine desire to help him get on his feet. Lurch's break finally came in 1996. His booming voice and imposing presence were featured on E40's track, Record Haters. He followed this up with collaborations on How We Coming alongside RBL Posse and Mystical, and Break Him Off with Sibbo. These early appearances quickly cemented Lurch as an artist to watch. Capitalizing on this momentum, Mike Mosley brought Big Lurch together with Rick Rock and Dooney Baby to form the group Cosmic Slap Shop. They secured a record deal with MCA Records, a major label opportunity that promised to launch them into the mainstream. In 1998, they released their debut album, The Family, featuring the single Sinful. Despite the major label backing, the album failed to sell as expected, and the disappointment led to the group's breakup, sending each member back to pursue solo careers. Undeterred, Lurch began hustling, putting out mixtapes in the streets to generate buzz and make money. The results were slow, but he landed a significant feature on a track with Mac Dre, Fire, which was gaining traction. Then, fate intervened with brutal timing. In the year 2000, shortly after his birthday, as Big Lurch was traveling back to Texas for his grandmother's funeral, he was involved in a horrific head-on collision with a drunk driver. The injuries were catastrophic. He suffered a broken neck and spent time in a coma, narrowly escaping death. His release from the hospital brought no relief. The collision had caused severe nerve and spinal damage, leaving him in constant, agonizing pain that he said could sometimes knock him straight to the ground. He was heavily prescribed morphine to manage the suffering. This reliance on prescription painkillers marked the start of his tragic descent. When his morphine prescription ran out, Lurch was left with an addiction and no legal means to cope with the relentless physical pain. In a desperate attempt to find the numbness he craved, he made a catastrophic choice. He tried PCP, or phencyclidine, also known on the streets as angel dust or sherm. Despite the immense physical and mental toll, record labels recognized the star power that still existed in Big Lurch and began reaching out, offering deals to help him rebuild his career. He eventually signed with Stress Free Records, owned by Milton Grimes. Grimes, a famous lawyer who had gained notoriety from his involvement in the Rodney King case, convinced Lurch to sign, promising to connect him with Roger Troutman Jr. Lurch started working on his album, but he immediately felt uncomfortable. A Blood Gang member himself, Lurch claimed the studio atmosphere was toxic, filled with gang members connected to Grimes who attempted to bully him and make him uncomfortable. Tensions rose, and Lurch, feeling threatened and seeking release from his restrictive contract, eventually left the label and returned to Texas. Back in Texas, Lurch needed money to fund his music, which drove him back to hustling and selling drugs, ultimately resulting in a drug charge and a stint in jail. After he posted bail, Milton Grimes reached out again, promising to use his legal expertise to help with the case if Lurch would return to California and Stress Free Records. Lurch accepted, but the toxic environment and threats only worsened, leaving him stressed, cornered, and feeling like a puppet in a contract he couldn't escape. Stuck and spiraling, he returned to hustling, setting up dope houses in San Francisco and running with a crew. His new friends, however, were heavy users of PCP. The gentle giant, who previously only smoked weed and didn't even drink alcohol, began using the hallucinogen to fit in. On one fateful night, Lurch was at a party in a dope house, and his friends kept pushing more and more PCP on him. The drug, which can induce extreme paranoia and the feeling of invincibility, completely overtook the wounded artist's mind. The next thing Big Lurch knew, he was waking up 2 weeks later, arrested, sobered up, and facing the impossible, a charge of murder and aggravated mayhem. The memory of the event remains a blur, a black hole in the mind of Antron Singleton. The last thing he could recall from the fateful night of April 10, 2002, was smoking PCP with his friends at the dope house, the toxic chemical completely overriding his conscious mind. When he woke up, he was already 2 weeks into his incarceration, unable to grasp the chilling reality of what he had done. The horrific details of that afternoon were relayed to him, details that shocked the Bay Area, then the nation, and cemented his name in the annals of true crime horror. This was the moment the fictional darkness of horrorcore rap became a terrifying, monstrous reality. On that afternoon, according to police reports, Big Lurch, still high on PCP, arrived at the apartment he shared with his roommate and his roommate's girlfriend, Tynesha Stewart. Tynesha, who was only 21 years old, was described as a beautiful and inspiring model who went by the nickname Pocahontas. Her 2 children were at school, and her boyfriend was away. She was completely alone. The drug, known for its ability to create delusions of godlike power and extreme paranoia, was raging in Lurch's system. He forced his way into the apartment, violently knocking Tynesha to the ground. She began to scream, but he brutally beat her until the screams stopped. Reports suggest his mind was fractured. He was frantically searching for more PCP, which he couldn't find, fueling his escalating panic and rage. The brutal climax arrived when he seized a knife from the kitchen. He stabbed Tynesha repeatedly in the chest. Then, in the moment that defined the sheer, unbelievable madness of the act, he sliced open her chest, reached inside, and grabbed her right lung, snatching it out with other organs, and, in an act of depraved, drug-fueled cannibalism, began to eat it. It is a detail so grim, so profoundly unsettling, that it instantly moved the case beyond crime and into the realm of the truly unthinkable. After the assault, Lurch tore off all of his clothes and ran down the street. It was Tynesha's friend, Elisa, who stumbled upon the horrifying scene of Big Lurch, naked and completely covered in blood, standing in the street, staring and yelling incoherently at the sky. She called the police immediately. When officers arrived, they testified that Lurch behaved like a savage animal, growling at them as they moved to arrest him. After he was finally subdued and taken into custody, Elisa rushed into the apartment to check on Tynesha, only to break down at the sight. Tynesha Stewart was barely recognizable. Her chest had been ripped open, she was missing her right lung, and a 3-inch knife blade had been snapped off and was embedded near her left shoulder. The coroner's examination only deepened the horror. Tynesha had suffered multiple stab wounds, a broken neck and jaw, and fractured eye sockets. Most chillingly, forensic analysis found a large amount of PCP in her system. She was not a drug user, yet the concentration of the drug suggested someone had forcibly poured it down her throat. When authorities examined Big Lurch, they found blood and pieces of human flesh in his stomach, tissues that matched Tynesha Stewart. This forensic evidence solidified the prosecution's case, presenting a narrative of an unhinged individual committing an act of savage violence. When Lurch finally sobered up in jail, the full weight of the truth crashed down. He had no recollection of the event, only a vague, terrifying memory of smoking PCP and believing the world was ending, convinced he had to find and kill the devil. The reality was far darker and far more permanent. He had killed Tynesha Stewart, and the public saw only a PCP horrorcore monster. He soon learned that his former lawyer and the head of Stress-Free Records, Milton Grimes, had taken on his case. Grimes, who famously helped with the Rodney King case, tried to convince Lurch to plead insanity, a plea that would have, in theory, allowed him to be released in about 2 years. However, in California, the plea of insanity does not apply when drug intoxication is the clear cause of the criminal act, a crucial legal detail Grimes may have either overlooked or intentionally obscured. The stage was now set for the next phase of the tragedy, a trial that many, including the victim's own family, would later call a judicial travesty. The trial of Antron Singleton, Big Lurch, was less about finding truth and more about painting a caricature of a monster. Milton Grimes, the lawyer Lurch had trusted due to his fame from the Rodney King case, instructed him to plead insanity, a strategy that was fundamentally flawed under California law given the clear involvement of drugs. Lurch was still under the influence of psychotropic medication, which rendered him incapable of lucidly assisting in his own defense. The prosecution, seizing the opportunity to exploit the shocking nature of the crime, turned the trial into a spectacle against the darkest corner of hip-hop culture. They used Big Lurch's own art against him. Songs like Texas Boy and I Did It to You, which contained disturbing, fictional references to figures like Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Jeffrey Dahmer, were played for the jury. These tracks, part of the PCP horrorcore genre, were not even officially released yet, but Lurch's lawyer had provided them to the prosecution. This tactic, using creative lyrics as evidence of criminal intent, echoed the controversial case of West Coast rapper X-Rated, whose lyrics and album cover were used against him in 1992. It was a powerful, emotional narrative that overshadowed any attempt at a factual defense. The legal nightmare worsened by Grimes's alleged tactical choices. He reportedly failed to provide Big Lurch with casual clothes, forcing him to appear in court looking crazy like a psycho killer, which prejudiced the jury against him. Furthermore, Grimes advised Lurch not to take the stand to defend himself. With witnesses and police testifying to the heinous crime and the undeniable forensic evidence of human flesh found in Lurch's stomach, the jury took only about 30 minutes to reach a verdict. Big Lurch was found guilty of murder and aggravated mayhem and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge ruled that being under the influence of PCP did not qualify as insanity. Later, with a clear mind, Big Lurch began to speak out from behind bars, claiming his lawyer had set him up and failed to present crucial exculpatory evidence. The controversial evidence included The murder weapon, fingerprints found on the knife, did not match Big Lurch's. The fatal blow. The medical examiner noted that a large blow to the back of Tynesha Stewart's head, likely inflicted by a child's scooter found at the scene with blood on it, was the probable cause of death. The bite marks. The teeth marks on Tynesha's body did not match Lurch's. The dog. Lurch had a pit bull in the house, a breed known to chew and eat things with blood on them, potentially explaining the missing organs. None of this was presented at trial. Lurch also questioned why, in a known trap house, only Tynesha's body was found, while the multiple guns and drugs that were reportedly on the table had vanished and the house appeared cleaned. He was convinced he was set up by his friends and his lawyer out of jealousy and betrayal. The crime was so shocking, however, that the narrative of the PCP horrorcore monster instantly superseded any consideration of a legal frame-up. After his conviction, Milton Grimes reportedly stopped answering Lurch's phone calls. The man who was once a rising star in Bay Area hip-hop found himself alone in prison, fighting against the cannibalism charge that made him a target from everyone from gang members to prison staff. The story of Antron Singleton is a profound illustration of self-destruction fueled by addiction and a subsequent legal nightmare, where a man's fictional art was used to seal his real-life fate. A year after the murder of Tynesha Stewart, her mother, Carolyn Stinson, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against a complex network of defendants, including Big Lurch, his bodyguard, Stress-Free Records, and shockingly, Death Row Records. The lawsuit claimed that these record labels had supplied Antron Singleton with drugs to encourage him to act out in an extreme, violent manner, thereby making him more marketable as a gangster rap artist. Suge Knight, head of Death Row Records, vehemently denied knowing Big Lurch or his music, and his company was later dismissed from the lawsuit. This civil action brought to light the darker suspicions surrounding the industry. The idea that the line between artistic performance and real-life violence was being deliberately blurred for profit. However, the deepest crack in the prosecution's narrative came from the most unexpected source, Carolyn Stinson, the mother of the victim. Despite the horrific crime, Carolyn Stinson always believed that Big Lurch was set up. She pointed to Tynesha's abusive relationship with her boyfriend, noting that Tynesha had all her bags packed and was ready to leave him on the day she died. Carolyn Stinson questioned the vanishing evidence, bloody footprints, fingerprints on doors, and a shoe found at the back door. Whose DNA, she asked, was it? She was told the DNA evidence was lost. Carolyn Stinson went public, stating her belief that Big Lurch did not receive a fair trial and deserved another chance. She had even been willing to testify that he was set up, but his lawyer never took her statement. In a profound, deeply emotional moment that defied comprehension, she went to the prison to visit Antron Singleton. She told him that she knew he was set up, and she publicly forgave him for her daughter's murder. This extraordinary act of forgiveness and belief in his innocence by the victim's own mother transformed the public perception of the case from a simple horror story into a tragic legal nightmare. For many Americans, it raised unsettling questions about how easily the legal system can demonize a troubled black artist, using his image and his art, his PCP horrorcore lyrics, to secure a conviction while ignoring potential evidence of a deeper conspiracy. Today, Big Lurch is still fighting for an appeal, a task made nearly impossible by the sensational cannibalism label that terrifies potential lawyers. His battle continues to serve as a haunting reminder of the devastating intersection of pain, addiction, and American injustice. The tragedy of Antron Singleton, Big Lurch, is not just the story of a horrific crime. It is a chilling cautionary tale about the devastating intersection of unchecked addiction, mental fracturing, and a ruthless legal system. Today, he remains in prison, still writing music, seeking a clarity and redemption that seem impossibly far away. His case continues to haunt the American legal landscape, raising uncomfortable questions about justice for black artists whose extreme, often fictional, artistic expressions are weaponized against them in court. Was he a monster or a desperately sick man? High on PCP horrorcore's influence, betrayed by the very man who promised to represent him? The mother of Tynesha Stewart, Carolyn Stinson, believes the latter, and her forgiveness stands as a stark, human contrast to the cold finality of the court's verdict. Big Lurch's unreleased album, It's All Bad, originally titled The Puppet Master, was posthumously released by his former labels, the same entities he claims exploited him, with cover art designed to sensationalize his crimes, cementing the image of the killer and allowing them to profit from his downfall. It is a bitter, profound irony. Even in chains, Antron Singleton's tragic story continues to generate income for those who may have contributed to his demise. The physical pain that led him to try PCP, the shattered spinal column and nerve damage, has faded into a permanent, psychological scar. Big Lurch's legacy is a whisper of what might have been, a promising voice from the Bay Area drowned out by a drug that made him believe he was fighting the devil. We may never know the full truth of that night, but we know the result: a life lost, a family devastated, and an artist imprisoned in a never-ending legal nightmare. We read every comment. If this story reminds you of the true cost of fame or the failures of the justice system, especially when art and reality blur, share your thoughts below. Do you believe Antron Singleton, Big Lurch, deserves a new, fair trial now that he is sober? If you want to continue exploring the tragic, untold stories of Black music legends who fought injustice and addiction, please consider hitting the subscribe button. We are committed to telling these stories with the dignity and respect they deserve.